Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Kavinsky's Tutorials. And today I'm looking at the long-awaited Fluss, which means river or flow in German, by Bram Bos and Hainbach. And their last release, Gauss, which came out in 2020, made my #1 iOS app of the year that year, and I still use it all the time. And, it's just such an amazing tool. So I've only been using Fluss for a few days, really, but I suspect that it's also going to become a very regular part of my workflow. I like it very much. Now, a couple of things to mention. First thing, I've got 5 copies of any app by Bram Bos to give away. Thanks, Bram. The details of how to win are in the pinned YouTube comments, so take a look there and follow the instructions. There will also be chances to win on Twitter and Instagram, so there are links for those also in the pinned comment. The next thing I want to mention is just how I will structure this video today and what we will cover. So the first thing is, I'll just mention straight away, Fluss is basically a granular synth / granular processor. You can record things into it and then play around with them. You can load WAV files. You can just use it as an FX app and so on. I'll show you all of these different uses later in the video. Also in the video, I will go through all of the knobs, sliders, and so on. And before I do that, I'll let you hear some examples of how Fluss can sound from some of my recent experiments with it. I hope they'll give you a little taste for what can be done with it before we actually get into the nitty-gritty. Now, there is a manual for it, and the manual is very good. But because it looks deceptively simple, but basically, it's an instrument, really. So like all instruments, there can be little things that can trip you up and so on. So I do think that even though there is that manual that is pretty short, I think if you watch this video, it will save you a lot of time from figuring out a few things that might otherwise be head scratchers. I'll also maybe play through a few presets, some of my own stuff, some of Hainbach's stuff. It comes with a lot of his factory presets recorded from various lovely equipment that he has in his studio. And then we'll finish off with just a quick overview. And when I do that, or maybe before that even, I will point out maybe one important workaround for a certain limitation, an intentional, I would say, limitation that the app has that some people might want to work around. So yeah, a lot of stuff to cover, but I'm going to try and condense it as much as possible. All right, let's first hear a few audio examples. Now, these are recent things, and I put these up on my YouTube channel, but glitched so nobody could see what was going on. Didn't make any mention to Fluss whatsoever, but all of these involved Fluss to some extent or the other. So if you follow Hainbach's Patreon, you might recognize that beat in the background. It's one of his lovely samples. Actually, I think that's a free one from the Isolation Loops pack. I love this sample. So here Fluss is bringing in all this glitchiness, and it sounds fantastic, I think. Now, next example here is a bit more soundscapey. So especially if you're listening with headphones or between 2 good stereo speakers, you'll hear some nice panning going on there. And all this kind of percussive thing that's changing its speed. This is coming from Fluss. I found I really like using it for these kind of soundscapey, percussive noises. And then here again we have another sort of soundscapey thing. And you can hear here these beautiful changes in rhythm and speed. And just everything disintegrating. Just tons of good stuff, tons of good stuff. Let's listen to what I've got going on here. I've got a bunch of different instances loaded. Some in motion, some static. Various different settings. You can see here, for example, I sampled a tuba. Here a double bass. Here I can't remember. Resonating it. The wonderful FAC Medusa. Just making everything sound great with this triple band preset. Anyway, let's go back to Fluss. Still one going there, hang on. That's that resonator and that needle point. Okay. So, let's look at the interface. Just play around a little bit first. Okay, so I think when you're trying to understand this, the best thing to do first is to start with one grain. So here I'm using the green one and no kind of motion or anything like that. Let's very quickly look at the interface. First, a very quick overview. So here we have the level of the 3 grains, and you can see that throughout the interface, the grains correspond to different colors. So one grain is orange, one is this purple color, one is green. And you can see here at the moment, we're only hearing the green one. If I bring this down, then we're not hearing anything, okay? Now, one very cool thing about the interface that should be explained, I think, right away is, first thing, okay, let's say I drag up and just leave my finger here, then I have set a static volume for this grain. But it also has 2 cool features. So one is that if we just make a kind of flicking motion, so watch what I do with the mouse here, which you'd normally do with your finger, but using a mouse is the only way that I can show you what I'm actually doing on the iPad. I just made a little sort of flicking motion there. And now it has started moving. If I make it a very fast flick, then it will move very quickly, right? So that's one thing that we can do. So we can do this with the sliders. We can do it here. We can do it here. okay, up here, these sliders as well, right? So these are all places where we can do this kind of flicking motion to get changes. Now, when this is moving, by the way, just double tap it to freeze it, and then just put it back to the center if you don't want anything happening. I'll explain this in more detail later. Another important knob related to this, another important slider rather, related to this Kinetic feature is the friction slider. So here we have 0 friction, right? This app is basically based on some ideas of Xenakis, the experimental composer who wrote a lot of books on, his ideas about music and so on. So Hainbach was inspired by these and coming up with this instrument. Also inspired by the Vestax Faderboard. So if we think about, normal objects, generally they're going to respond to physical forces, gravity, and so on, so that eventually there will be movement and then it will lead to inertia. So here we control the amount of friction. So if I put friction fully up and I flick this, you can see that it stops moving quickly and becomes static again. If I put this down here, there's no friction and it will go on forever, basically. And so you've got the whole range there between those things. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, another important thing, if we touch with our finger and pull down from the top or pull up from the bottom, then we have now set boundaries. So here, when I flick, it's going to remain within a certain range. So we're never going to have 0 volume for this grain, for example. Okay, so this is the principle of friction in the app. Okay, so now let's look at movement, okay? I'm trying to think of the most sensible way to explain things here. So there are 2 different things we need to look at when we want to control the movement of grains. One is this here, when it's set to scan speed. Okay, so you can see here, it's moving backwards. If I bring this over here, that speed has increased. Now look what will happen if I bring it over here. Now it has reversed direction. Now look what will happen if I play with this. This is speeding it up. So basically this here is a multiplier for the speed setting here. So if this is set at 0, then no matter what you do here, it's not going to do anything. But if this is not set at 0, this will multiply the speed, and it can also be used to modulate the direction. Direction can also be modulated here. Right, so we have a couple of different ways of doing that. Now here is for the filter. Now the filter also has a dry wet. Now another mode that we have here is pan mode. So you'll hear that if you're wearing headphones. again, double tap to freeze. Okay, let's open something else. This is quite a useful one to get started. So here I just recorded a C note from a SWAM or SWAM, whatever, audio modeling cello. I just recorded a straight C note. And so now the grains are running along that note. We can see that we've set different grain levels. We're setting speed here, but we're not letting it move around. And here we have set the pitches in a certain way. And if we click down here at the bottom, we have scale mode, and I have it set to C minor. Oh no, actually it was set to something else. Now you can see, I mean, we can actually play the scales. I'm not sure, by the way, why there's minor and Aeolian. They're the same, as far as I know. So now it's going to be quantized to D minor. And so now what happens? Here we're putting the green grain, all of its sounds up an octave. Here, down an octave. Okay, so this is octaves. We got 3 octaves we can play with. Here is pitch. So let's take, for example, this purple one. Now, we can also have scala import, and we can have unquantized as well. We also have glide here. Let's hear what it's like unquantized. This can be very good for atmospheric stuff, soundscapey things, and so on. Now, how smoothly it actually glides will depend. Like if we have bigger grain sizes, for example, it will be smoother. Now, one of the things that Hainbach loves, apparently, is this phase type filter, which comes from the, which is based on the Oberheim Xpander. And we also have other filter types in here. Then over here, we have this shimmer section. And you can see here, we also have a global tuning section. So this is default. And this is half speed, double speed, double tap to set the default. Now with the shimmer, the size is basically the size of the delay that determines what gets fed back into the grain cloud for processing. And the feedback is basically the amount of processing. And ambience is basically something like room size. So from a small space to something very cavernous. So let's look at some other controls. So here we're controlling the grain direction. So you can see here the grain direction is backwards. And that's forward. All I did here was record in 4 piano notes. Now we'll look at recording and things like that very shortly. So what else have we got here? This is the envelope for the grains. So here we're getting basically much harder envelopes. And here, maybe more attack and decay. Here we have grain size. And density, basically the number of grains. So take a look at each of these and see how the number of little dots increases as we increase this. Now here, this is like a spread basically for the grains. So you can see at the moment that's at 0 and the grains are following these playheads. But as we bring this up, they start to become a bit more spread. You can see here a bit of wandering around from the playhead, so this determines how much it can wander. Now, if you have something you want to save, you just press save and enter the name and OK, fine. Here you can load your user patches or instrument patches or processor patches. So the instruments basically have WAV files already loaded into them. We'll take a look in a second at the difference between those different types of audio units that we can load for Fluss. So it has quite a few presets, not so many for processor. You know, processor, really you're going to have to experiment for yourself to get things that sound good, especially in terms of scales and things like that. But there's a lot of very nice factory presets in here. And then here, we can export presets. Now, something I find a little bit annoying is that even if a preset already has a name, you need to enter a name for it. I think it would be better if it just showed you the name that it already had and then you could use it or not. But I don't know, maybe there's some technical reason why it doesn't do that. Anyway, it's not a huge big deal. So you enter a name. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And then you go to OK, and then you choose where you want to save it, and so on. Now, only thing is, it doesn't have any batch import or export. So if you want to export presets, you need to export them one by one, unless there's some way to do that I have not seen. I did ask Bram about it, but he hasn't got back to me on it. But it does seem that there's no batch export. So I think that's something that could be added. It also means that if you want to import presets, you need to do it one by one. Basically, the way you do that is you just click on the preset and it will automatically open in Fluss. And then I haven't actually done that myself, so I haven't checked whether you've got to press save or not, but you can experiment with that. But again, batch import would be useful. Okay, now let's look at the different ways that we can load Fluss. So basically there are 4 different ways that we could use this app on our iPads. One would be just open the standalone app. Another one would be, and I'm using AUM by the way here, great host, also Hainbach's favorite host, or at least the one he tends to use anyway on iOS. And I've done a video on this, so if you don't know how to use it, check that out. Almost everything you need to know about AUM. Give you a good 1-hour walkthrough of all the basic features. So this big node here, this is where we load instruments. So if we go in here and load Fluss, now it's basically an instrument. So there's several things we can do here. One thing is we can load factory presets. Another thing is if we press on this WAV button, then we can just load from our own presets on our device from the cloud, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the instrument. Now do note this dry and wet here. This refers only to the filter. It's not a general dry and wet control. Also, one control I haven't mentioned yet over here is this output. And this can be very important. I do recommend using this app with a limiter because especially if you play around a lot with the filters and you put like big grain density and so on, if you have a lot of resonance, it can very, very quickly start to push you into the red. So it's definitely wise to use some kind of limiter with this, especially if you're pushing things, or especially if you're using the Kinetic function and you're making, very fast and radical moves with various sliders that could all be, at a certain point, they might be spread in their values. So some might be near the bottom of their slider or whatever, some might be near the top, but then at a certain other time, they might all be near the top and you could have like really, big volume increases. So be careful about that. Now, another way we can open it up is as a processor or a recorder. So let's just look at this one first. So this one here is a recorder, right? So how does this work? 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's exactly the same as what I recorded before, so that's why it doesn't look different. So all you have to do is just press record when you're ready to record and turn off record when you want to finish. So there's no syncing in this. Hainbach is very much into encouraging people to do things by ear, get away from sync to beat, etc., etc. But the parameters are exposed now. Thank God this was fixed with a last-minute fix. So the parameters can be assigned to external LFOs, etc., etc. I haven't gone through, but just to give you some examples, if you wanted to use this in more quantized ways, let's say things like the grain levels, the way that Hainbach is into using these is more along the lines of, either use them static or use your fingers to modulate them and so on, play it like a live instrument. But I know that there are some people who would like to use this as a regular gating effect, for example. So to do that, all you would have to do really is use an LFO and send the same LFO, for example, to each of the faders, and then they would all go up and down in perfect sync with that LFO. So if you're into synced stuff, that is there as an option. Just looking quickly here, because I haven't gone through all of these because they weren't working before. I don't know if there's a sync for the record. Didn't see it there. But anyway, train your ears. It's not that hard to press the button on time. Okay, so that's record mode basically. And then once you've recorded, you just take off or keep on, whatever you want, your source, and then play around with Fluss. Okay, so this is record mode. Now then we have the processor mode. So processor mode, if you see, we don't have the WAV button that the instrument has. We don't have the record button that the record instance has. We have this input amount thing. So let's put this on, for example. Now I have turned down the input completely. And here I can increase the volume. And then I can start playing around with things. Okay, now I think there's only one more thing that I haven't covered, unless I'm mistaken. I think I've gone through pretty much everything. So here, when we're using this as a processor, this is basically our kind of buffer. So you can see it can record, and it will record the last 6 seconds of whatever you're putting into it. And then here we use the blue lines as boundaries. So let's just I'm just going to use 1 grain to keep things simple. So you see here, now it's only getting the very, very most recent part of the input audio. So this will make a very big difference to your sound. Okay, so as I say, there are a lot of factory presets, and I really don't have time to go through them, but I'll maybe just go through a couple. Let me load as an instrument. Let's go to this one. Just going to give you very quick samples of a few of them. One thing I would like is if you could hear the original sample. You can't. So some great things in here to give you ideas, get you started. And of course, remember that you can easily just replace this WAV file with something of your own while the other presets will stay the same. So that can be pretty cool to play around with. Lovely. So, you know, I think this has been a real labor of love for both Hainbach and Bram. I know in his video, Hainbach mentions that, you know, Bram also had a lot of creative ideas when it came to the app. He wasn't just doing the programming. So I think they were bouncing off each other a lot. Anyway, it's turned out to be a really interesting app. It's been about a year and a half in development. I do feel that a lot of love has been put into it. So let me just finish off then with a quick little overview or review, let's say. So what I'm really glad about is that although, as I say, it sticks very much within Hainbach's style of wanting to push people away from quantization, if you do want quantization, then those parameters are exposed and you can use external LFOs or whatever else you like, you know, use your MIDI controller as well to control things. But I do think this is very clever. The ability to set the upper and lower boundaries is really nice. I have sometimes found that it didn't respond in the way that I was hoping, but I think that's basically just me getting used to where exactly to press and things like that. I love the fact that, you know, it can be used in 4 different ways: standalone, as the instrument, as a processor, and as an app that you can record into and then process stuff. So it's very versatile in that sense. It's really handy to be able to just open files right here inside the app, but also to be able to load it as a recorder and process stuff, or well, load it as a recorder and record things in your session in AUM, and it can record for a really long time. I actually forget how long it can record for, but it's pretty damn long. It's like over 100 seconds or something, I think. So that's super cool. What I would like to see then is batch import and export. I think that would be a great feature. Let me see, another thing that I like, if we have it at smaller sizes, if you click between the two, we get this lovely scrolling motion followed by one of them becoming the dominant screen. I think it's a very elegant way to do things. And then at these smaller sizes, actually we have access to both. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that happen when you resize this. At these bigger sizes, we've got no need to jump between things. So there might be 1 or 2 points that I've forgotten to mention. If there are, I'll try and include them in the pinned comment. If you enjoyed this, everyone, I'd strongly recommend you watch my video on Gauss and subscribe to the channel if you're into iOS music. I make videos pretty regularly. Sometimes they're more just pieces of music, like the stuff that I played you at the beginning. Sometimes they're very detailed walkthroughs like this. So there's quite a variety there. And I also often have giveaways, almost always, especially when I'm doing a walkthrough on an app, there's going to be some kind of pretty generous giveaway for YouTube, Twitter, and Insta followers. So thanks for watching. Hope you found this useful and have fun with this extremely fun app. Take it easy.